Hi, hello, and good morning on this Tuesday morning. We're going to get started so we can be timely, because that's always important. My name is Molly Cox. I'm just going to sort of walk us through this process today, at least in certain components. But I thought before we get started, because many of you are volunteering your time and expertise, that we should go around the room just so you know who's in this room, so that we can see sort of a collective amazingness that is here, yeah? I'm gonna start here in the front row. If you could just stand and speak very loudly so that we could hear you. Just your name, where you're from, and if you know the panel that you're serving on, and you should, because you have a cheat sheet right at the top of your folder, that would be amazing. I'm gonna start here.
So I'm Jessica DeWayne. I'm with the Department of Human Services, and I'm serving on the Child Abuse Prevention and Intervention panel. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Esparza. I'm with the Department of Human Services, and I'm serving on that same committee, Child Abuse Prevention and Intervention. Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shonda Esquivel, and I'm with the Department of Human Services as well, and the Kindergarten. Cool. Yolanda Pettis with the Department of Human Services on the Seniors panel.
Good morning, I'm Micah Clark-Katerick. I'm with DHS Head Start, and I am on the Kinder Readiness panel.
Hello, my name is Jessica Reese, and I am part of the Policy Council, and I'm with the Kinder Readiness.
Hello, my name is Victor Vitt. I'm with the Municipal Court, and I'm on the Youth Success panel.
And I'm John Bull. I'm the presiding at the Municipal Court, and I'm on the Youth Success panel.
I'm Kathleen Denny, Department of Human Services and Youth Success.
Good morning, I'm Alvin Lowenberg. I'm the retired CEO of Morningside Ministries here in the city, and I'm here representing SALSA to the Area Foundation and also the Joint Commission of Elder Affairs. And I'm on the Seniors panel.
I was like, you know a lot of things. There's a lot of things.
Well, I am retired.
Everybody's always retired has like 52 things to do. Like, I'm retired, here's the 52 things I do.
I don't get paid for any of them.
I'm Richard Keith with the Department of Human Services, and I'm working on the Financial Security panel and also the Domestic Violence panel.
I'm Norma Hernandez. I also work for the Department of Human Services, and I'm supporting Richard Keith on the financial security and domestic violence.
Hi, Annabelle Madoquindia with DHS, and I'm in the Financial Security panel.
Good morning, I'm Delrick Washington. I'm with Adult Protective Services, and I'm with the Domestic Violence panel.
I'm Ariane Expandi with SA 2020, and I'm on the Child Abuse Prevention and Intervention.
My name is Micaela Rios, and I'm with the San Antonio Education Partnership in Catholic College, and I'm with the Economic Development and Workforce panel.
Good morning, I'm Mary Miller Baker. I'm the Early Childhood Director of the Edgewood School District, and I'm working on the Kinder Ready.
Good morning, William from SAP, the Engagement Program on the Youth Success panel.
Good morning, Minerva Malgus with DHS, and I'm with Domestic Violence. Good morning, I'm Maria Rivera with DHS, and I'm on the College Readiness and Career Ready panel.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Andrea Guerrero Guajardo, and I am at UIW School of Osteopathic Medicine, and I'm on the Economic Development and Workforce panel.
Hi, Sonia Rosa Hernandez, I'm the Opportunity Youth. I'm with Matt Foundation.
Hi, I'm Josh Bailey.
She's our chair for SA 2020 Commission on Education.
Yes,
you did say that.
Hi, I'm Josh Bailey. I'm with the Department of Human Services, and I'm lead of the Child Abuse Prevention.
I'm Caitlin Lindenberg. I'm with the South Alabama Regional Alliance for the Homeless, also known as SARA, and I'm on the homeless list.
Good morning, I'm Ana Acevedo. I'm with the city, the Economic Development Department, and I'm the lead on the Economic Development Workforce.
I'm Rebecca Flores with DHS on Opportunity Youth.
Awesome. We just have three. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Lisa Black. I'm at San Antonio College, and I'm on the homelessness.
Brilliant. And then towards the back, y'all, you want to tell everybody who you are?
I'm Letitia Kavanagh with the Department of Human Services. I'm responsible for all this email today.
Esparza. I am with purchasing with the City of San Antonio, and I help facilitate this RFP.
Not along with the Department of Human Services, I'm the fiscal administrator and helping with the consolidated
My name is Kristen Flores. I'm with DHS also. I work in the director's office, so I'm kind of helping with everything.
Good morning, I'm Marjorie White, I'm the homeless administrator.
Awesome. So you can see that there's sort of a breadth of people who work at the city and people who don't work at the city and people who are volunteer and retired. I heard it, Alvin. Focusing. So it's going to be really important, right, to get to know your own panels, but then also just to know that you're here, some of you, because you're paid to and you're required, but the rest of you who are volunteering your time, thank you so much for doing that. So typically when I'm facilitating this, I have to reiterate, I work for SA 2020, which is a nonprofit organization, so I don't work with the city. So as a person outside of the city, thank you for contributing your time to make our city even better. We're going to walk through a couple of things. Inside your folder, I'm going to quickly go through what you've got in there. On the left-hand side is the agenda for today, so you can see kind of where we are in the current agenda. We're at welcome and introductions as of right now. Right behind that is a glossary of terms. In the RFP, that request for proposal, as well as the evaluation, which we'll go through, so don't worry, there were terms, impact, results, outcomes, outputs. We want to make sure everybody has the same definition, so that glossary is there. Right behind that is a timeline, which Anna will go through in just a minute. And then we have the evaluation, which we'll go through in a second. And then finally is a survey of today's convening. So if you'll please make sure to fill that out before you leave and just leave it with us before you go. On the right-hand side is a 2-pager, which we'll go over in just a second as well, about your particular panel. And then right behind that is the full copy of the request, the RFP as it stands, so that you can see exactly what, if you haven't read it, I sleep with it under my pillow. But some of you may not have read it yet. So if you haven't read it, you'll at least have it in front of you so that you can actually go through it and see what's there, yeah? So I'm going to turn the mic over to Jessica and Anna, who are going to walk us through that first part to kind of get us on the same page about where this consolidated funding process started.
Good morning, everyone. As I said, I'm excited to be here, and I'm even more excited that all of you are here as well. Just to reiterate what Molly said, we really do appreciate the time commitment and the dedication that you've shown to help us through this process. And some of you may not yet know what you've committed to, but you will know within the next few weeks. So accept our thanks in advance of that process. We just want to give you a little background and some context before we get started. So one of the things that people often don't realize is that we've started this process since 1979. We've been awarding funding to human and workforce development services in the community. Our priorities have changed over the years, but it's always been focused on where are the areas that we feel we can make some long-term impacts, what are city council priorities, and really just to help improve the quality of life for residents in our community. And leading into this process, we really wanted to shift that focus, and we wanted to say, why is it that we really do this? So we've been doing this from 1979. What are the tangible things that we've achieved as a result of this investment, this funding, and how can we be a little bit more strategic about it? And so going through that process, we actually brought in SA 2020 and Molly Cox, and then our equity office to help us kind of unravel why it is that we even do consolidated funding. And the consensus that we came to is that we really are doing this process to maximize the investments of the Department of Human Services and the Economic Development Department to further the work that we do and the mission and the critical services that we know are important for the community, and how do we do that in a more focused and strategic way. So in looking at the purpose of the consolidated funding process, we really wanted to focus on the heart of it, which is to provide services to those that are most vulnerable in the community. And a lot of times we talk about how we have infinite need and very few resources. But really in looking at that, there is great need in our community, but what are those populations that are the most vulnerable? And that's where we want to focus our services. And as I said, we also want to complement our city direct services So for example, for the Department of Human Services, we offer Head Start, Early Head Start. What are some kinder readiness services that we can use to shore up the work that we're doing in that area? We also want to align with our city council priorities and then streamline the funding process so that we ensure that we're being very strategic, we're focusing investments in a way that's going to actually achieve a targeted outcome. And then just looking at our long-term outcomes, so that some of this should look familiar to some of you. We have 4 long-term outcomes for the Department of Human Services, and then each of the funding priorities are related to panels that you may be serving on. So our first long-term outcome is that children and youth are safe, healthy, resilient, and ready to succeed in school and life. And within that area, we're looking at proposals specific to kindergarten readiness, child abuse prevention and intervention, disengaged youth, opportunity youth, college and career readiness, and community data hub, which is this is a lot packed into that one long-term outcome area. So there's great need within each of those funding priorities, and what you'll be doing is helping us decide what are the services within these areas that are going to help us achieve this long-term outcome over the long haul. Our next area is individuals and families are financially secure and in stable housing, and we really have 2 funding priorities in that area, which is financial security and domestic violence. Homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. And again, we have a lot of funding priorities in this area. Chronic homelessness, youth homelessness, family homelessness, veteran homelessness, individuals that are near homelessness, so they may not yet be homeless, but they're on the cusp of becoming homeless, absent services, and then homeless individuals with HIV. And then the last area in the Department of Human Services that we're focusing on through this RFP is that our seniors are healthy, engaged, and independent. And in that area, we really are focusing on senior center activities and programming, and then other social services that we can bring to our senior centers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna to talk about our economic development areas.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see, most of the committees are working in funding areas with DHS, but we do have one area that is in the Economic Development Department, and that is the overall outcome is that San Antonio's workforce fuels a globally competitive economy that drives income growth and prosperity for all residents. So from the economic development side, that's what we hope to accomplish through the delegate agency services. And so the 2 funding priorities, we actually have combined them for one committee to evaluate the proposals, and they're in targeted career attainment and career preparedness. And the targeted career attainment has to be in one of the 3 target industries of IT or cyber, biomed, and manufacturing. And then career preparedness are those things that, skills that people need in order to move ahead or to even get a platform job. And so next we're going to go into the evaluation timeline. And you have this sheet in your packet. I believe it's on the left-hand side. And you have the breakdown, so you don't need to memorize this or anything, but what I want to point out in terms of the timeline is that obviously yesterday and today were the training sessions for the evaluation panels. And then after you get trained, you'll get instructions on how to access your proposals. And so through June 15th, you need to go ahead and read those, score them, and then you should be having a convening with your committee the week of June 18th through the 25th. You're going to have to meet twice. The first time you meet with your evaluation panel or committee will be to discuss the scoring. So everybody needs to come prepared with their scores per proposal, for each proposal, and their notes so that you can discuss that. And then the second meeting will be an interview where you will interview each applicant, each agency that has submitted a proposal for your committee. All of that has to happen by the 25th because by the 26th, those recommendations are due to DHS. And then you can see with a timeline that July 1st through September 6th is the agency no contact period, and then the budget gets adopted on September 13th. So Molly's going to take it over from here and see if you all have any questions.
So, everything that you've heard so far, do you have any questions about? can I just get a show of hands on how many people have participated in this process in the past? I felt like a lot of P's. It was very alliterative. Did you get that process in the past? So the rest of you are new-ish. Yeah, never participated. Excellent. So I think there's a couple of things that we're going to go over that are great for newbies and also for the more seniored people who have been through this process in the past. Yeah. First, inside your packet, remember we talked about it, probably fourth back is going to be this evaluation matrix that I want to talk through. Before we go any further than that, though, I want to hit on a couple of things. Number one is a theory of change. The Department of Human Services, through this consolidated funding process, has been walking through, actually, the city of San Antonio, along with 5 other major funders, have been walking through a process of trying to determine how to create the biggest impact with their funding. And understanding, quite frankly, that they cannot do that without nonprofit agencies. So how do we maximize our departments, or how do we maximize our funding dollars if we're not partnering with nonprofit agencies who are helping us do that, right? There are currently about 6 funders working together, about $153 million between the 6 of them, to deliver an even greater impact to their community at large. So when the Department of Human Services began going through this process along with EDD, what we found was very specifically that there's a component of trying to get to an end, right? You saw those long-term outcomes that were on those first few slides. And the idea of a theory of change is a comprehensive description and illustration of how and why a desired change is expected to happen in a particular context. So the request for proposals has been written as such to say, all right, this is what we're trying to achieve. Can you give us your theory, the basic assumptions of how you believe we could potentially get there, right? That's what you're looking at. Is whether or not the information being provided inside this application really will get us through that process. I want to walk us through a couple of things, mostly so that we can figure out the accountability of when you're looking at these proposals. And some of you, I think, have a few to read, and others have 27. Was it the highest one? 37. So it's a moment. It's a minute that you just have to spend. This is the hierarchy of effects from Bennett Rockwell. What we've typically found in working through these hierarchy of effects is obvious. You'll know it as soon as you see it. That typically what we measure inside organizations and at the city and in corporations across the board is the thing that's easiest to track. Participation, right? The number of people that walked through the door. That's typically the easiest thing. In fact, if we were to sit back and say, hey, we evaluated the workshops, we could say, oh, 40 people showed up this morning, right? Mostly women, some men. Here are the race, ethnicity, maybe we found geography or your zip codes, right? We can immediately track that. It's super, super simple. It's also the lowest rung of the ladder, if you'll notice, right? So if we move up the ladder one bit, we get to reactions. Did you like the space that we were in? Was the air quality okay? Did you find the bathrooms all right? Right? Just reactions. Again, super easy to sort of gather. What the RFP started asking very specifically, and what nonprofit agencies track to many degrees, right, are the next 3 rungs of the ladder, and they're the hardest sometimes to quantify, which is why that theory of change, the idea around those assumptions, is so important to understand. We're asking for learning opportunities. These are short-term outcomes. They sometimes can take anywhere from a year to 3 years. The idea about, was there a shift in knowledge? I've been telling a bunch of people recently that I'm trying to get fit by 40. I don't have much time, to be fair. But I can't just be fit, right? There's stuff that occurs inside of that, like learning things like couscous is good for you. It's disgusting, but it's better for you, apparently, to eat. Vegetables are good. You're supposed to like get your heart rate up for 30 minutes a day. I learned that. It took me nearly 40 years to learn it, but I learned it. It won't matter if I don't have a shift in action after that learning, right? So now that I've learned something, I must shift my actions. I now work out. I work out. One person, thank you. It'll shift my behavior, right? That's going to take a tiny bit more time. It could take anywhere from 3 to 5 years. It could even take longer, but we can track that, right? I learned that I should eat vegetables. I'm now eating vegetables. And then there's the shift in condition, that long-term ultimate space, right? I am healthier, I'm living longer. That's the final end. That could take anywhere from 5 years, 10 years, could take a minute. I need it to happen in a few months because I need to be fit by 40. But that's sort of what you're looking at inside of these proposals, is when you start to see words like outcomes, outputs, impact, results, this is the kind of stuff that you're looking at. Does it make sense? Are the assumptions there that a shift in learning occurred to lead to this shift in action, which will ultimately, at some point, shift the outcome that the Department of Human Services and the Economic Development Department have asked for? So when we look at this evaluation, I'm going to walk us through it very quickly so that we keep a few things in mind. Number one, each of these criteria are connected to like a section in the RFP. So if you look at the very first row, you've got a criteria. It says organizational general 1. That's the first question that they're answering, an organizational general in the RFP, right? Which will come up in your proposal. At the bottom, in your footer, is the page numbers. So agency experience, background, and qualifications are 30 points. That's going to be criteria 1 through 13. It's numbered on the side. Everybody with me so far? Cool. The next piece is going to go across, right? So in the very first column, we've got the number that it corresponds to. In the second column, we have the criteria that we're looking for. In the very next column is 0 points. It was not fulfilled, this criteria. Can't find any evidence of it. I can't, it's not there. Now, it may not be that it's not fulfilled because they don't have that information. It just may be that they didn't put that in the application, right? An example could be, there's a question on here about ADA compliance. It's really either, yes, they're ADA compliant, or no, they're not ADA compliant, but if an organization didn't put it in their application, it's a 0, but maybe it's a question for follow-up. Hey, I can't see you it doesn't say anything about you being ADA compliant. Are you ADA compliant? Can you prove that? Yes. Oh, okay, then you get that point back, right? You have 3 options, sometimes only 2, because it might be, no, they're not ADA compliant, or yes, they are, right? It's a yes or no. You have 3 options. 0, it's not fulfilled. There's a second column, partially fulfilled, and that's going to shift. The numbers are there, 1.5, 1, sometimes 3. It's contingent upon how many points are allocated. And then the third column, which is completely fulfilled, they get full points. There's no wiggle room inside of that. You can't say, like, I know that they're partially fulfilled at 1.5, but I like them, so I'd like to give them 2.2. That's it. Those are your options, yeah? So let's talk about a few things that you should keep in mind. Number 1 is, Jessica mentioned it earlier, there's infinite need, there are finite resources, right? Across the board. Infinite need, finite resources. In fact, in that first page, on the right-hand side, that's a 2-pager, what it shows you is how many proposals your particular group turned in, how much money is being requested, and how much money is actually allocated to you. What we know for fact is, in the consolidated funding process, there's 10.6 to award. There's $24 million in requests. So we know, right, that there is infinite need, finite resources. Your job is not to determine allocations. And I think in some cases it's like, I don't want to be the person that says this doesn't get funded, right? Your job is not to do that. Your job is to find the proposals that will help the departments of human services and the economic development achieve their outcomes, right? Which are the proposals that will maximize their own departmental outcomes? That's going to be super, super important. There are a couple of other things that I just want to make sure that we mention. Number one, this is not an exact science. And anybody that tells you that human services or economic development is an exact science is not being truthful. We are looking at basic assumptions. In some cases, they are evidence-based. We know that research exists. We know that there are measures of success and metrics that are there, but something that could work in one population might not work in another. Something that could work for children might not work for adults, right? It's not an exact science. It's something that we are assuming and then measuring to determine whether or not the outcome exists. No one has all the answers either. So here's the thing. As you're going through your evaluations, right, and you can do that a number of ways. I would really suggest that you read the request for proposal first. I would super suggest that you read your proposals. You can read all of them and then go back and score them separately, or you can score them individually, yeah, as you go. Make all the notes that you possibly could. Why did you give somebody completely fulfilled? Why did you give somebody partially fulfilled? Why did you say something's not fulfilled? So that you have that information at the ready for any questions that may come up during your panel discussions. You're not going to have all the answers, and neither will your panel leads. And that's okay, right? That's why the conversations exist. We'll get back to you with answers that may be able to be answered. But I would say take copious notes so that you know why you gave somebody a particular score. And finally, we're looking at continuous and ongoing improvement, right? So as you're looking through these proposals and you're seeing sort of like, this makes sense, these assumptions are there, there's some evidence-based theory, I see shifts and changes based on what they've been occurring. I also want you to be thinking about the process of this evaluation as well. That this is also a continuous, ongoing improvement process. Here's how we know that. This is the first time that there has been a matrix to score. It's the first time that there's been objective numbers to go on the evaluation itself. We want you to remove subjectivity from this. It's one of the first times that the RFP has been tweaked and reworked based on nonprofit agency feedback. There have been multiple meetings with nonprofits to say, hey, tell us what's working and what's not, so that we can get to where we need to make sure that we're getting the best answers. I'm going to stop there and ask if you have any questions about what I just went through. It's because I'm thorough, y'all. That's fine. We're going to move through in the next portion of this, sort of the code of conduct and the financial stuff and all of that. And then we're going to break up into our small panels so that you can meet your project leads, that you can meet the other people on the panel, so you can ask any additional questions. And then we'll be done and you can go on your merry way. So I'm going to bring up Charisma to go through the next piece. You almost sat, I saw it. I forgot to go through interviews. Let me do that real quick. I'm sorry. There's going to be an interview process for every single one of the proposals. Every agency that turns in a proposal is going to get to speak to the panel. This is a new thing. So part of your note-taking is also like, hey, I need some more clarification on your measures. I need more clarification on the evidence-based research that you said. That can be part of your interview process. Once you've developed those questions with your panel, we will then send the questions over to the organization so that they can answer them very specifically. You've got to show up for the interviews. The interviews can range in time. That will be determined by project leads, right? It could be a 20-minute interview, it could be a 5-minute We're trying to get that figured out based on the kinds of questions that are coming out at the end of it. But that's why your notes are so important. Use those for clarifying questions, yeah? All right, Krista. Now that you've said, you didn't say, okay, good.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Charisma Esparza. I work for the City of San Antonio's Finance Department and Purchasing. So I was assigned to DHS to assist them with the release of the RFP. So that is my role. I've been working with DHS since even before the calendar year on getting this RFP streamlined and a more happy, less cumbersome process in RFP. So I'm here today to speak to you about two important pieces. One is the code of conduct. So before you leave, everybody's going to need to fill out a form that's called a code of conduct form. And this is for both the City of San Antonio employees and non-city employees that are sitting as evaluators to this project. The code of conduct form is a form where we ask for you to review the proposals in a very ethical manner with high integrity and also to not share the information that you're reviewing outside of the evaluation meetings. We request for you to keep that information private because there's still, once you complete your evaluation, once you have your evaluation meeting, once you submit your scores, after interviews, there's going to still be a further process where DHS is going to have to identify the funding for each of the organizations. And that is a piece that, again, as was mentioned earlier by Molly, you won't have to participate in that actual funding piece of it. But still, the review of their proposed plan, a review of their experience background qualifications is really what we're requesting for you to provide your input and thoughts and your scores. So DHS can do that additional work that's necessary. So as I mentioned, the Code of Conduct form, this is a form that all of you will need to submit or complete and submit to DHS before you exit today. It's a 3-page form, but it's asking you, again, various questions, or it's, once you acknowledge the statements, that you're going to hold yourself to a moral and high integrity and ethical manner when reviewing the proposal. So I'm going to make sure, or if you do not have this document in your packet, please let us know. We have several extras in the back and we can get that to you. Okay, and then next is prohibited financial interest. This is very important because I'm sure that as you're reviewing some of these proposals, you have business relations already with many of them. Or you might know somebody that works for that organization. So therefore now it's maybe you're waving a red flag, wondering, is there a conflict of interest? Can I be reviewing this if I know the director? Or if I have a relative that works for this organization? The way the law is written, and I'll go ahead and read it, and it's up here. But if a committee member is a party to a contract, or any of the following individuals or entities is a party to the contract, which includes a spouse, children, parents, siblings, or a business entity in which a committee member or any of the individuals listed above owns 10% or more of the fair market value of the business entity. Okay? Or if a committee member or any of the individuals listed above will act as a partner or subcontractor to the party entering into the contract. So, as you're reviewing your proposals, if you identify my brother works for this organization, and if he gets this contract, he might get a nice bonus off of it. Is that a conflict of interest? Yeah. More than likely, yes, you're right. I think if that little bulb goes off in your head, just present that information to DHS or send me an email. My information, my email address is included in the RFP document, and simply ask, hey, my best friend works for Avance. Is that a problem? And I'll go ahead, work with our ethics attorney with the city, and we'll vet that answer. We'll get that answer for you, and then determine if you're able to still sit on the evaluation committee or not for that project. Okay? It will be for the entire project, not just for that one single proposal. All right? So if, as you're reviewing these proposals, and I say, we live in a big city of San Antonio, but what the type of work that you do is very small city. Everybody's connected. There's a lot of relationships, friendships. If you have a distant friend that you occasionally see at a gathering, that's not necessarily a conflict of interest. But what I would request is if you were to see them out at a gala or an event, just refrain from talking about this specific project for this funding year. If you currently have a project, you're in contract already receiving services, that's fine. That's fine. Continue your business relationship as normal. But anything to do with this specific project for the fiscal year 19-20 consolidated funding, refrain from that conversation. If they have questions, direct them to myself, Charisma Esparza, or direct them to any of our DHS staff. And we'll go ahead and reach out to them, let them know the status of the project. Because I know they're eager. They want to know, okay, where do I fall into this? Am I going to get the monies I need? They're working on their budgets. Just direct them back to us. We'll go ahead and let them know where we are in the process. Be politically correct and provide with the information. But just do keep in mind, nothing is final though until it's approved by City Council. So a lot of things are going to constantly be changing, moving. There's a lot of moving parts with this evaluation up until it's approved by City Council. All right? Any questions that you have for me concerning either the code of conduct form? Yes,
One of my committee members yesterday mentioned that they're also a funder. So many of the proposals they will be reviewing, they will also be reviewing as part of their RFP process or whatever they're doing. Is that considered a conflict? Because they'll ultimately become a partner with this agency with whatever they're doing.
So let me understand the question. They submitted a proposal for this RFP. No.
So the committee member is part of my panel,
Okay.
but they're also within their role, within their organization, they're also a funder. So similar to like we're going through this process, so they're in our shoes, but from their end.
Is that a
Now,
conflict?
is that going to be a conflict when the proposal that they will be reviewing will be the same people who will probably apply for whatever they're doing within their organization?
My immediate response to that's a great question, is that no, there's not a conflict. Unless they're obtaining some type of financial interest with the award from the city of San Antonio. Personally. If they personally are receiving any financial, if they could get a promotion based on this, if they can receive any type of financial personal interest on the award, then that's a conflict. But if there is not that happening, that's any additional questions? I'll stick around also in case you have any. I'll be available. Thank you.
So we're going to break up into our smaller groups. If we could have panel leads stand. Perfect. We're going to move you. Last time was chaos, so we'll move you. Let's start here, Rebecca. Go over to the corner. She's going to the judge. And that's, which panels are there?
Youth success opportunity.
Go to that corner over there. I'm going to bring seniors over here. I'm just going to give you your section again.
Thank you.
So if you're seniors here, you were up here, weren't you? Kinder, buddy. Oh no, you've got, is it just the two of you? Well, stay there, yeah, because I'm moving the seniors anyway. Okay, so yeah, stay here for kinder and what else? Is it just kinder readiness? Okay, so kinder readiness is here. Homelessness, it's y'all. Cool, just move that way. Yeah, excellent. Go that way so you don't mess up the seniors. What are we missing?
Financial security and domestic violence. Financial security and domestic violence, we'll go over in this corner over here.